Hi there, my name is Sukwon. I'm an SSAT teacher here at Elite Apgujeong, and today I'll be showing you how to solve a few questions here on a practice SSAT passage. Here it's going to be a historical passage. So let's go ahead and get started. So what you're going to want to know for solving SSAT passages is that it's very important, of course, to be able to comprehend the passage, right? Doubly so for historical passages, because sometimes they can be written in a slightly archaic, older style of English that's hard for us as modern speakers of English to understand, right? So you really need to pay attention very carefully to the text line by line. Make sure you know what's going on, right? Because of course the questions all reference the text and stuff in the text, right? So let's get started reading here. And for historical passages, all passages, but historical passages specifically, you're really going to want to pay attention to the caption at the top if there is one, right? Because it often provides us important information that we would want to know in order to better understand, for example, the speaker, the context of the passage. So we read, the following speech was delivered by Susan B. Anthony at her trial in 1873. So we get three bits of information here, right? Susan B. Anthony's a speaker. Susan B. Anthony's on trial, right? She's been accused of a crime, and they're trying to decide whether she's guilty or innocent. And the year is 1873, right? So it's perfectly fine, of course, if you don't know who Susan B. Anthony is, right? Or you don't really need to go know what's going on here in the United States in 1873. But it's helpful if you do, right? I do, so I'll explain it very briefly to you. Susan B. Anthony was a women's rights activist, specifically somebody who worked towards advancing the cause of women's suffrage. That is, getting the right to vote for women. Because, of course, in 1873, women did not yet have the right to vote in the United States, right? So it's nice information to know. You don't need it, but if you do, it'll help you understand it better, right? So let's start reading the passage for real. Friends and fellow citizens, I stand before you tonight under indictment for the alleged crime of having voted at the last presidential election in 1872 without having a lawful right to vote, right? So immediately we're kind of given a few bits of information. We know why she's on trial, right? Why is she on trial? Well, she's been accused of a crime, that crime of being having voted, right, in the presidential election. And normally, of course, voting is not a crime. So why is it a crime for her? Well, it says that she doesn't have the right to vote, right? You might not know that women don't have the right to vote yet, but it'll become clear as you read the rest of the passage here. So let's continue. It shall be my work this evening to prove to you, okay, so she's telling us what she's about to do, that in thus voting, I have not only committed no crime, but instead simply exercised my citizens' rights guaranteed to me and all United States citizens by the national constitution, right? So she's saying here that she's going to do two things here in this passage, in this speech, right? She's going to try to prove that she's innocent, has committed no crime, and also the only thing that she was doing is exercise the rights. And does she have those rights? Yes, those rights are guaranteed to her and all citizens by the Constitution, right? The federal law, the law of the land, right? Let's continue. It was we, the people, not we, the white male citizens, nor yet we, the male citizens, but we, the whole people, who formed the Union, right? So she specifies a few things here, right? If you know your history, if you know your United States history very well, you might recognize this line, we the people, of course, from the preamble to the Constitution of the United States, where it says, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, so on and so forth, right? So it's a historical reference there. But even if you don't know that, she clarifies that later, right? She's saying that the people of the United States, or the 13 colonies at the time, came together to form the country, to form the Union, to form the United States, right? But she makes clear who these people are. Is it just men, right? No. Is it just white men? No. It's the whole people, everybody came together to form the Union, right? Everybody did this work in forming this new country, the United States. And we formed it not to give the blessings of liberty, but to secure them, not to the half of ourselves, but to the whole people, women as well as men. Right? So she says a few things here, right? One, she says that the blessings of liberty were not given by forming the Union. Right? So she's referencing this idea of natural rights, of rights that exist just kind of broadly out there, right? For example, the right to life. All people should have the right to life. And she's saying that these rights, these liberties, were not given by the formation of the union, but attempted to be secured, right? That is, made sure that people have them, made sure that people can practically exercise them, use them in forming after having formed the union, right? And to who were these rights secured? For these rights, and for whom were these rights secured? Not to the half of ourselves, not to half the country, half the people in the country, but to the whole people, right? And of course, when she says whole, she means both genders, right? Both women and men here. We continue. It is a downright mockery to talk to women of their enjoyment of the blessings of liberty, while they are denied the use of the only means of securing them. What is that? The ballot, right? So she's saying that it's a mockery. It's offensive. It's making fun. It's not right, not proper to tell women, hey, you guys have freedom. You guys have liberty. You guys get to experience and enjoy all these things. When what? When women are denied the use of the only means of securing them, right? The ballot, right? She's saying that you can't tell women you have freedom when they can't vote in order to make sure that they have the freedom, right? Because of course, the United States, being a democracy, right, you need to be able to vote for people, elect people to the government, and those people will make sure that you have these liberties, that these liberties and freedoms and rights are secured, right? So she's saying that it's offensive, right, to claim that when women can't vote. Last paragraph here. The only question left to be settled now is, are women persons? And I hardly believe that any of our opponents will have the hardihood to say they are not, right? The wording here is slightly confusing, right? But the only thing she's saying here is, well, she's asking rhetorically, this is a rhetorical question, are women people? And she's asking this because the answer is so obvious. Yeah, of course women are people, right? But then logically, according to the second paragraph, what follows? Well, people form the United States. Why did people form the United States? Well, to secure the rights and liberties that they have, right? And what are these rights and liberties? Well, they are secured through the ballot, right? So she's saying that if women are people and people form the United States, then women as people should be guaranteed the same rights and liberties as everybody else, right? And how do you make sure that they're guaranteed? Well, people have to vote, right? Women need to be given the right to vote, right? So her line of logic that she's sort of finalizing here in the sentence is, if women are people, right, then as people in the United States, as citizens of the US, then they should have the right to vote. And she makes that very clear in the very last sentence here. Being persons, then, women are citizens, and no state has a right to make any law or to enforce any old law that shall abridge their privileges or immunities, right? The last few words here are a little bit confusing, right? But the message is essentially what I just said previously, right? Being persons, then, women are citizens. Okay, so women are people, right? People are citizens, right? And states don't have the right, that is, the individual states of the United States can't do what? Abridge their privileges or immunities, right? And all this is saying is, well, abridge means to sort of get in the way of, or to block, or to remove a right, for example, right? So she's saying that because women are people and these people are citizens, states can't take away the right to vote from people, and women are included in, this definition of people, right? And so the line of logic that she establishes here, and then like she makes clear in the third paragraph, is, people made the U.S. Why? To secure rights and freedoms, right? And then how do you do that? You vote, right? And she's saying that if people made the U.S. and people made the U.S. to secure rights and freedoms, and in order to do that, people need to vote. Well, if women are people, then women should also have the right to vote, right? It's a pretty straightforward line of logic that she makes clear in these two paragraphs. So, having gone through the passage and understanding what she's trying to say, let's go ahead and move on question by question. First, with question 16. Okay, so we read in 16. In line 1, Anthony's use of fellow citizens is ironic for which of the following reasons, right? What is irony? Well, irony is when something is a little funny, humorous, or perhaps, there's a contrast or disparity or something that should be there that shouldn't be there, and that's notable to us for some reason, right? So let's try to find out what this sort of bit of humor or this contrast might be. She says, "Friends and fellow citizens, I stand before you tonight under indictment for the alleged crime of having voted." Right? Well, what's her whole point that she established in the second and third paragraph? Well, she's saying that women. Well, she's saying that women should have the right to vote. Right? Why? Because women are people. People are citizens. Citizens, vote to secure rights and liberties, and that's why the United States was formed. Right? But do women have the right to vote now? No. Right? So she's pointing out that absurdity between women are people and citizens, right? And citizens should have the right to vote. But do women have the right to vote? No, right? So that's the irony, right? So she's saying fellow citizens, right? Clearly she's talking to the members in the courtroom at her trial, maybe the judge, the jury, other people that are present, probably mostly men, right? We can't really make any specific assumptions, but it's safe to say there are probably multiple men in the courtroom. And so when she says fellow citizens here, she's pointing out the fact that it's funny and it's sad, right, that she as a woman doesn't have the right to vote, despite the fact that she is or should be a fellow citizen, just like the rest of them, right? So let's start with E here. At the time, women are not allowed to make speeches on public issues. Well, that's very clearly wrong because she's making a speech on a public issue right now. Right? That's not a crime, right? The crime was trying to have voted, but this speech wouldn't exist, this passage wouldn't exist if they weren't allowed to, so it's not E. D. Those in the audience who were her friends were not necessarily citizens. Again, that's assuming too many things about the people in the audience, right? Does she have friends in the audience? Are those friends citizens? Are there people who are or are not citizens in the audience? We can't say for sure because, of course, the caption at the very top gave us no information on who the people in the audience were. And of course, she doesn't really refer to that in the passage itself, other than having said friends and fellow citizens, right? There is no sort of indication as to whether her friends are fellow citizens or not, so we strike out D. C. Most of the citizens in the audience were females. Again, caption in the text, is there any reference to, this many people in the audience were women? No, there's no reference to that in the text, so we strike out C. B. The audience included people not of her sex, race, or religion. Well, we don't know what race or religion she is based on the caption or the passage itself. She was white and she was Christian, right? But we don't get that information, right? So you can't really assume that we can pick B here, right? Because we lack the information about the audience, just like we did in C and D. We struck out B. So the only one that makes sense here logically is going to be A. She was not fully a citizen because she had no right to vote. Right? So she's making the argument that women are citizens, right? That women should have the right to vote, right? But do women have the right to vote here? No. She's arguing that the right to vote for women should be secured, right? And of course, being a citizen, being citizens, women should have the right to vote, but they don't. Therefore, she's making the sort of argument that women should be made full citizens, should be given the rights of full citizens, and not be denied the right to vote. So the answer there is going to be A. All right, let's go ahead and move on to question number 17. What does Anthony mean by "I stand before you tonight under indictment"? Well, here we know what situation she's in. She's been accused of a crime, that crime of having voted, right? And of course, the caption says that too. She's on trial, right? What's a trial? You're in a court. There's a judge. There's a jury, right? And they're trying to decide: did you commit a crime or did you not? Are you guilty? Are you innocent? Right? So you might not know what the word indictment means, but you can kind of guess from context clues that it has to do something with the crime. Being accused of a crime, being brought before court, that's being under indictment. Right. So let's start from, let's see here, A. She had been framed by her opponents. Well, what does framed mean? Right? Frame means that somebody comes together and tries to make up, fabricate, invent evidence that somebody's committed a crime and tries to push it on her. Yet, does she deny having done the things that she's been accused of? No, right? She does not, in anywhere in the passage, claim she hasn't voted. She hasn't voted, right? She did vote. She did try to vote, right? She's arguing that that action itself was not a crime, not that she didn't vote in the first place, right? So there's nothing about framing. There's nothing about opponents trying to make up the fact that she voted because she did vote. She did, right? So we strike out A. B, she was already in jail, right? Well, no, she's on trial. She's in a court, right? And like logistically, practically, you might say, oh, she might have been in jail, right? Right before the trial, right? They arrest her, they put her in jail temporarily, and then they bring her before court. But has she been accused of a crime? Has she been sentenced and then put into prison, put into a jail? No, right? Right now she's in a courtroom. She's on trial. They're trying to decide her guilt, right? So you might be able to sort of if think make some assumptions based on how the courts work, but probably not. We'll leave a squiggly next to it just to leave it on the back burner for now. C. She had been falsely accused of voting in the last election. Well, very easily on the same grounds that we struck out A, we can strike out C, right? Because she never denies that she voted, right? She did vote, right? She's trying to say that having voted was not a crime, or specifically having voted as a woman was not a crime. So we strike out C. D. She was on trial. Well, that part's definitely correct. And might be sent to prison. Well, check, right? That's how trials work, right? They're trying to determine whether she's guilty or innocent, right? She's on trial for a crime. And of course, what happens in a court? Well, they decide whether you go to jail or not, whether you're guilty or innocent, right? So that seems like it makes the most sense. So we'll leave a squiggly next to it too. And then E. She had been allowed to speak by special permission. Well, no, right? There's nothing in the passage that indicates, oh, she normally couldn't have done this. She normally couldn't have spoken, but she is, right? There's nothing in the passage that indicates that, right? She's just making a speech in court, as most people have or as all people have the right to do, right? So there's nothing about special permissions there. We strike out E. And so between B and D, right, you have to make too many sort of assumptions about like physically, logistically what she was doing before the speech to assume B, so we strike that out. And logically, it seems like D makes the most sense, right? Because she's definitely on trial, and she might be sent to prison, right? Because that's what trials are. That's what people are in courtrooms for. All right, let's go ahead and move on to question number 18. How does Anthony's speech reflect the idea in a speech by Abraham Lincoln, in which he defended government of the people, by the people, for the people? Right? If you're good at your American history, right, you might know that Abraham Lincoln was the president of the United States during the Civil War, and that this quote comes from the Gettysburg Address, right? In which he talks about the reasons, right, or partially talks about the reasons in which the United States was formed by, right? The sort of relationship between the United States government and the people of the country, right? But even if you don't know all that historical information, right, you can kind of get what he's saying by looking at the relationship between the prepositions, right? Prepositions and the two groups talked about, government and the people, right? So what does it mean for government to be of the people? Well, for something to be of something, here it's just saying it's made of, right? Made of, right? So he's saying that the government, people elect people to represent them in Congress, right, as president. And so government is made up of the people. What about by the people? Well, by the people's, like an author, it's by X author, right? So when he says government is by the people, Lincoln is saying that government is has been formed, motivated by the needs and the wants and desires of the people, right? By the people, similar to of the people, right? So made up of the people, and then the people have done it, so it's made by the people. And then finally, when he says for the people, right? In this sense, government for the people means that the government should act according to the needs, act according to what the people want, act according in the best interests of the people, right? So here, Lincoln is simply establishing the relationship between the government of the country and the people of the United States, and he's saying that it's made up of the people, right? It is made by the people, elected. People elect representatives, and then the government should be working in order to help the people, right? It should be representing their desires, right? Their feelings and their emotions. And so Anthony's speech, I think you'll realize at this point, does share these similar relationships, right? Does share this idea of the similar relationship between the people and the government, right? When she says, of course, right, it was that we the whole people who formed the union to do what? To secure the blessings of liberty to all people, women as well as men. Right. So she's saying that, the government was formed, right, in order for people to have their rights secured through government, right? And how do they do that? Well, the means of securing these rights, right, means of securing the rights of the people through the government is by voting for people, the ballot, right? Voting for people to represent you in Congress as president. And then those people are hopefully supposed to make sure that you have these blessings of liberty, right? So let's take a look at our answer choices here. Starting with E. It demonstrates that laws in violation of the Constitution are null and void. Well, here, does she really talk about the constitutionality of the law? Not quite, right? In the last sort of sentence here, you might be tempted to say, oh, she says that states don't have the right to law, don't have the right to make laws that abridges people's rights and immunities. But it's not a broad argument, right? It's not an argument that talks sort of about laws in general. Here, her central message is, oh, people need to have the right to vote. And so this isn't really an argument about constitutionality. It's not really an argument about specific laws, right? It's just generally an argument that puts forth the idea that women should have the right to vote, right? So you can strike out E based on those grounds. D, it shows that by voting, Anthony was overreaching her rights as a citizen. Well, very clearly, I think we can say that that goes against this idea, right, of government of the people by the people, right? Because Lincoln is saying, oh, people should have the right to vote in order to elect their government, and that government will hopefully represent the people, right? So quite contrary to the idea. And of course, Anthony herself does not believe that, right? Anthony doesn't believe that she was overreaching. Anthony believes that she was doing simply exercising her rights as a citizen. C, it shows that women can only have a theoretical interest in affairs of state. Well, what is she trying to do here? She's trying to prove here, of course, that she should have the right to vote, that women should have the right to vote. And of course, voting is a very practical, tangible matter. It's not theoretical, right? And so it's not simply about the sort of idea of government. It's not simply about talking about or thinking about or making theories on government. It's a practical involvement in who gets to be in government, elections, voting, right? And so C doesn't make sense. B, it shows that educated women can solve the problems of government. Well, that might be true, right? That might be a nice idea to believe, but is there really anything here that talks about education specifically, or only educated women should have the right to vote? No, not quite, right? There's no sort of discrimination or variance depending on level of schooling, right? So educated is kind of strange here, right? And is there anything about the problems of government? No, not really, right? It's about voting isn't about simply solving the problems of government. It's about representing the people, right? And having the sort of rights and liberties of the people secured through voting. So it's not about government problems, it's about these fundamental rights. So we're left with our correct answer choice, A. It points out that all citizens should be able to elect their government, and that's of course represented by of the people, by the people. And of course, she makes that point a couple of times here in the second paragraph, right? It was we, the people, right, who formed the union, not to the half of ourselves, but to the whole people, right? Everybody should be able to secure these rights. Everybody should be allowed to vote. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to question number 19. 19. Why does Anthony say that the women's right to vote is guaranteed by the Constitution? Well, remember the sort of line of logic that we established earlier when we went through the passage, specifically in the second and third paragraphs, right? So the argument here that she makes is that people formed the U.S. Why? To secure rights/liberties. And then how? How do you do that? You vote. The ballot, right? And of course, the ballot is a piece of paper, or these days sometimes electronically, right? The method through which you vote, right? And so the argument that she's making is that people formed the U.S. to secure their rights and liberties, and in order to do that, you need to be able to have the right to vote, right? And then, of course, she's saying that, oh, well, who are the people? Like, what is included in this definition of people? And then she argues here in the third paragraph, are women people? Are women citizens? And she's saying that she asks this rhetorical question because she knows that even the fiercest critics of the women's right to vote are not going to say, oh, women aren't people, right? Of course, they would agree with the idea that women are people because they are, right? And so she's saying that if you accept this idea that women are people, then you should be able to then go through this line of logic and say that, oh, women should have the right to vote, right? So let's go through the answer choices here. A, the Constitution explicitly gave women the right to vote. Well, would we be in this mess? Would she be making this speech if the Constitution did? No, because women don't have the right to vote, or that right isn't secured by the law in 1873, right? Constitution does not say that. Explicitly, of course, means like directly, word for word by word, and the Constitution does not say that, right? Because if it did, there wouldn't be this problem here. B, one of the blessings of liberty is being allowed to vote. Well, that very well might be true, but remember, what's the relationship here between the blessings of liberty and the vote, right? You might think, oh, liberty is being allowed to vote, but pay very close attention to the wording here, right? She says, we formed it not to give the blessings of liberty, but to secure them, right? And the means of securing them, the blessings of liberty, is the ballot, right? So she says here that voting is a way, a process, a means, a vehicle by which people can secure the blessings of liberty, not like one of the blessings of liberty specifically, right? So B doesn't quite make sense textually, right? And of course, it doesn't really go through this whole line of logic when it comes to women too. So B doesn't make sense. C, the Constitution gave states the power to authorize women to vote. Well, again, we don't really have any information about the text of the Constitution here beyond what she told us, right? Do we know whether the Constitution gave states this right? No, we don't know that, right? Because she doesn't really talk about the specific constitutional provisions other than we the people formed the Union. We the people are represented in the Constitution, right? So C, not explicitly stated in the text. We don't know that information. D, only children and criminals were denied the right to vote. Well, first of all, no, right? Women are denied the right to vote, right? Because that's why she's making this speech, right? If women were not denied the right to vote, we wouldn't be having this speech, right? And does in the passage she talk about children and criminals not having the right to vote? No, she's talking about women, right? So these doesn't make any sense. And so we arrive at E. The Constitution begins, we the people, right? She does specify that, we the people, which includes women, right? And we the people includes women, and because people form the US, in order to secure their rights and liberties, they need people to vote. People should have the right to vote, and of course, if people includes women, right, as the Constitution begins with we the people, then women should have the right to vote, according to this argument that she makes here in the second and third paragraphs. And so E is going to be the right answer for number 19. All right, let's go and move on to the last one there, which is going to be number 20. The purpose of Anthony's speech was to. Now, at this point, we should be pretty clear on what the purpose is. She's making a very specific argument here, so I think we can go through the answer choices pretty quickly, pretty easily here, right? So, A, influence the women on the jury in her favor. Well, do we know if there's women on the jury? There could be. Probably not here in 1872 or 1873, right? And we don't really know the composition of the jury, so you should immediately be sort of kind of iffy about answer choice A to begin with, right? And would she want to influence just women? No, of course she's trying to influence everybody, right? She doesn't say, women of the jury, I stand before you tonight, blah, blah, blah. She says, friends and fellow citizens. She's talking to everybody, right? So specifically singling out women here in answer choice A doesn't quite make sense. B, prove the right to vote would produce racial equality. Ooh, does she talk about racial equality in the passage? She does mention race very briefly, right? She says, not we the white male citizens, nor yet we the male citizens, but we the whole people, right? So she's saying, she implicitly argues that, all people should have the right to vote, regardless of race. But she doesn't make that argument explicitly, and then nor does she actually say that getting the right to vote for everybody would result in white people, black people, other races being totally equal in terms of racial equality, right? That's not the argument that she's making. She doesn't really reference race other than this sort of very slight allusion to it, right? So B doesn't make sense. That argument's not present. It's about women getting the right to vote. C, demonstrate that she and other women had the right to vote. Now, I think, at this point, it should be pretty straightforward that she's arguing that that women do have the right to vote through this sort of process of women being people and citizens, people forming the U.S., and people forming the U.S. in order to secure rights and liberties. And you do that by voting, right? So women should have the right to vote. That line of argument, which we went through a couple of times, yeah, that's exactly what C is saying here. D, convince people of the need for economic justice. Ooh, economic justice? Equal pay for equal work. Does anywhere in the passage does she talk about money, the economy, sort of the economic disparities between men and women? No, right? It's about the right to vote. It's about the law. It's about the Constitution, right? Nothing about economics or money here. And then finally, E. Convinced the jury that voting was only a tool to be used by women to gain other rights. Well, she does say that in order for people to enjoy the blessings of liberty, they need to be able to, they can only secure them through the ballot. But does she say that that's the only reason that women should have the right to vote? That voting is only a tool? No, this is too narrow wording, right? She's saying that women fundamentally have the right to vote, being that they're citizens, being that they're people, right? So E is too specific of an answer choice because it says that it's putting a slant, it's putting a sort of a focus on her argument that doesn't exist in the text, right? No, she argues that women have the right to vote fundamentally as people, not just as a tool to gain other rights, right? That's too narrow an interpretation of her argument, so we can strike out E. And so, C makes the most sense. Of course, the Anthony's speech was to convince, or was to demonstrate to the people in the courtroom that she and women in the United States had the right to vote, and that right to vote should be secured. All right. So today I've gone through a practice SSAT test for you. Have a great day.